Welcome to this edition of Thought to Action, presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, the president of the London Center, and I'm here to talk to you all today about a critical issue that I think is ignored greatly by not only the mainstream media, but our own government, human trafficking. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to hit the like button. Please share, subscribe, and comment. We always want your feedback. And if you enjoy our content, please join our Patreon. As a subscriber, you will also have access to our Ask Us Anything sessions, where we at the London Center answer your questions. And when we answer them, it's always interesting, just saying. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and our website, londoncenter.org. Today, we're going to talk about a serious issue that relates to human trafficking. And so joining me today is Andi Buerger, who's with the Voices Against Trafficking. And she's going to talk to us about her organization, her experience, and an upcoming book. So Andi, welcome to Thought to Action.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Andi, as I mentioned in my introduction of you and the issue, there seems to be a real reluctance for people to first off grasp the scope of what goes on in this area. I think it's almost so big it's frightening. And secondly, I think there's a limited capacity of law enforcement to get into it. So can you talk a little bit about your Voices Against Human Trafficking, what you all do, and then let's talk a little bit about your book.
Absolutely. So Voices Against Trafficking came out of a previous organization that I started called Beulah's Place here in Central Oregon, which was our shelter where we rescued at-risk homeless teens off the streets, found out many were trafficked, many were abandoned, and most all, actually all of them were running from something more devastating than what they thought the streets would be. So out of 13 years in that capacity, I felt like we needed more voices to be engaged in the fight against human trafficking. I saw firsthand how sometimes the justice system doesn't work or fails. Victims who try to report, law enforcement doesn't always listen or believe the victim when they report, especially if they're younger, 14, 15, up to 18-year-old. And we saw that in national headlines with the Epstein case. These young people that try to report take a lot of courage. And to do that, we need to give them more credence. And so, again, out of all of that, Voices came about. And the idea, Tony, is if you think about a wheel, there's a hub in the middle, and then you have many spokes. And so our spokes are basically individuals, corporations, other nonprofits, leaders from different countries who all come together saying, we want a collective voice. We want to be a collective leverage so that, when we do ask for legislation or we do pursue solutions, we have the power behind us. And so to that end, we started on Capitol Hill because if you're going to start a movement, right, go to Capitol Hill. And that's what we did in 2019. And out of all the representatives, Tony, we had 7 members of Congress, both sides of the fence, that showed up to our event. And we had over 200 attendees and over 20 international organizations represented. So that was the start of Voices. Yeah.
So would you mind mentioning a couple of the members that showed up? I'm always curious about giving the members of Congress credit since I slam them constantly. I always want to be able to kind of point them out when they do something good.
Absolutely. We started with Representative Pete Olson out of Texas. He's the one that actually got us the venue and was able to get us started there and hosted the event. And we had Representative Chip Roy out of Texas, Representative Jim Costa from California, great supporter, and a fabulous Congresswoman, Debbie Lesko out of Arizona, and Wagner in Missouri. We also had Representative Chris Smith and now retired Representative Greg Walden. And so we just had amazing people that showed up despite all the other things going on in fall of 2019. And to this day, they continue to be helpful to us, and we are growing our influence, which was another reason. Our campaign, Tony, Add Your Voice, we are looking to get 1 million names on our roster. So in the next year or two, we can take those 1 million names and use them as leverage for a number of reasons.
That's excellent. So I'd like to believe that Congress is helping you through their enormous funding to actually give you the resources to do some good, because this has been one of my frustrating points. And I've actually met with Mark Meadows on this. When you talk about infrastructure, the left wants to create all these pet projects, but yours is one that actually is infrastructure that helps people. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it seems to me that within the government, there are only a handful of places. Obviously, kudos to those members of Congress who helped you. Obviously, any Congress member I speak to, I will try to get them linked into you guys. With that said, it seems to me that the federal government itself is not predisposed to helping a great deal, and it requires in the private sector to jump in. And you guys, your volunteer centric focus is important. But let's talk about that for a second. My efforts in the past, when I've detected something, I've noticed that there are essentially organizations that they pretend to be intake rescue services, which are actually run by private security and actually do the opposite. They're almost, it's like the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. And when you report that, and I've spent some time reporting organizations which I thought were doing that, the FBI wouldn't even take the report. So my experience has been that only two federal organizations seem to be helping, and that seems to be DHS, and DHS seems to have a fairly good number of folks focused properly on this, and U.S. Marshals. Is that, am I missing something here? Or is that kind of the way things are working right now?
I would agree with you on that, because I have seen DHS work personally and on a greater level, and definitely the U.S. Marshals were kicking butt the last few years with finding missing children, getting kids that were trafficked out of trafficking. They have done an extraordinary job, and my personal opinion is that it starts from the top down, and if the top is covering up, then everyone else will follow. Yeah, and as you said, sheep or wolf in sheep's clothing, whichever way that was. Right. But what we've done, look at Simone Biles. I mean, she went to the FBI in 2015.
Think
Why is
that.
it?
Yeah.
Incredible. And then, they turned the tables on her. They tried to make her the bad guy. And this is really, okay, now I'm on a soapbox, but this is what happened.
Please, no, we agree on this. And just listening to her layout in her testimony. And oh, by the way, apparently nobody from the Department of Justice even bothered to show up and listen to what she had to say about DOJ's failure. There's something really wrong with that. And this woman, this woman was essentially trafficked by her own doctor. And again, I think this is something that's underreported, hidden, because in many instances, this guy was actually in an official organization. That official organization was seen as too important to be challenged by law enforcement, and law enforcement then became focused on covering up rather than trying to defend the individual and get to the bottom of what happened to her. I find it atrocious.
Absolutely. Look at the university system. I mean, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Southern California, the scandals, and yet we don't hear about the convictions or anybody getting busted for that. Right. So then you go back to the federal level, like you said, the same thing's going to happen. What better place for a predator to get their hands into something than in a field that looks like it's protecting children? For example, here in Oregon, a former Speaker of the House for Oregon was indicted for human trafficking. And when he was indicted this year, he was working as a board of directors for a community college. All of the product he needs was right there, in front of him on the college campus. So again, if we don't have law enforcement, and there are a lot of good ones, I know I've had a lot of great law enforcement help, but they're ground level. And so if they bring cases, and in our area, the district attorney doesn't believe that human trafficking happens because he doesn't prosecute it.
Right.
And he also believes that if you're 18 and you're a prostitute, you chose that life. That is absolutely wrong. And anyone watching needs to know that, because when a child has been victimized, I was trafficked. I was a child sex trafficking victim from 6 months old to 17 years old by family members and a few extended family members before there was ever a term. It's only by the grace of God I'm not a prostitute or didn't self-medicate myself to death or other things. But Not everyone is so lucky. So a child doesn't grow up saying, gee, I wish I could be a prostitute. It's a way of life that happens out of the hurt that happens.
No, and I've seen that, and God bless you and your courage and ability. Like, so I've women initially very early on sexualized, as I guess the best way to talk about it. They were essentially sexualized before they were pubescent, which is like horrible. I mean, again, I don't want to get gross here, but Andi, I don't think people understand how early some of the grooming starts to get children into this, where they don't even recognize how bad it is. I mean, it's almost like a spectrum of how certain adults in networks. Let me be very clear on this, because I don't think it's done in every household. I'm just saying there are specific instances of individuals who recognize how to use the system, how to hide their own activities, and sexually basically convince these children that what they're doing is okay, not to report it, and then they transition into teens, and then teens turn into 20s, and it's almost as if people don't want to acknowledge that these sort of things happen.
Absolutely, you're right on. And familial trafficking, like in my case,
exactly.
Protect them. You can't take the people that are hurting you into counseling or get help when you're a minor usually. And so, now some of the laws are different than obviously the 60s and early 70s when this happened. But the point is, to your point, absolutely. So every 40 seconds in this country, in the US, a child is abducted. And that's right. Donald Washington, the director of U.S. Marshal Services, he stated that last year. So every 40 seconds in every town, Tony, in every state and all over the world, kids are being taken. That doesn't mean they're running away. Oftentimes they're lured away. A job, oh, come be a model. I just need to take some photographs, for my portfolio, or hey, it's okay if you don't have a car. I'll pick you up and we'll go mow lawns, or whatever it is that they use to engage these kids. And you're right. People would be astounded that babies, toddlers are being used for sexual practices. And in America, Rutgers, a couple years ago, USA Today had a Rutgers report where it said 2.5 million Americans buy children for sexual activity. So we are the ones asking for the product, basically, which are children.
Yeah, and no, it's just terrible. No, I appreciate, again, your courage to speak out about this. Yeah. So Andi, let's talk a little bit about your book coming out. So I think it all relates directly to what we're talking about here. So can you tell us a little bit about when your book's coming out, what's going to be in it, and what you plan to do with the book once it's out?
Absolutely. Voices Against Trafficking, our organization, is going to have its first book called Voices Against Trafficking, The Strength of Many Voices Speaking as One, out in, looks like early November. It'll be available on Amazon. And Tony, the purpose and goal of this book is to, one, educate. There are about 20 chapters from different people in different aspects. Some are survivor leaders, some are organizations, some are high-ranking media and legislators. So this book has different perspectives so that we educate the public. We can actually create greater awareness globally. It'll be distributed internationally. And we also want to inspire action. I speak because I need to speak so that maybe the next person won't have to suffer like I did. But one voice is great, but many voices are greater. And so what we're going to do with the book is make sure that we get some funding to put it in the hands of every Senate member, Congress member, the governors of every state, and also the attorney generals of every state. And then every year bring out the top voices from all over the world in a similar edition. We're hoping that we can reach people and really touch their hearts and minds. For example, we have somebody who is very proficient in the gaming industry, video gaming, and she explains the traps and how parents are fooled. And so there's a chapter on that. We have media people speaking out about the media's role or lack of it. So this book is going to be very critical for people's knowledge all over the world.
Well, Andi, thank you for bringing it up. And I'd like to have you back when the book actually hits, because I'd like to talk about some of the chapters in it. And then also see if I can get some more members of Congress, maybe even have a discussion with us on this, because I know there's a number of members that you've mentioned. I know a couple that aren't directly involved, but I think they would be interested to
Great.
have a discussion on this, because I think the awareness issue is something that we are obligated to those. Once you know about this, I think you're almost obligated to kind of say, y'all need to pay attention to this because this has been hidden in plain sight. And one of the things I've said to my friends, Andi, is that, I spent decades chasing bad guys overseas. Little did I know, I had no idea, because of any number of reasons, being naive to it, I had no idea this level of insidious, hurtful activity was going on right in our own country. I had no idea. And so your effort and the effort of your team to get this out is hugely important. So thank you for telling us about this. Thank you for being on Thought to Action today. And again, as soon as the book is out, I'd like to have you back to talk about it more.
That'd be great. Thanks for the honor. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you all for being part of this edition of Thought to Action, presented by the Herb London Center for Policy Research. Remember to hit that like button. Please share and subscribe. Please comment, helps the algorithm. And make sure that you subscribe to our channel, hit that bell so you hear every time that we get new content up. If you'd like to help us continue to create good programming like this and good content, please join our Patreon at patreon.com, Thought to Action, and you'll get a sneak peek at our new activities. Plus, you get exclusive access to Ask Us Anything, which is always an interesting and robust discussion of our distinguished and senior fellows. So thank you again for joining me today to listen to Andi Buerger and her Voices Against Human Trafficking. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, and we'll see you again very soon.